At Thanksgiving, my mom asked a question that felt like a punch. She praised my brother's perfect home, then turned to me. "When will you finally settle down?" she asked with disappointment. She did not know I found the ugly truth about his mortgage 2 weeks before. I did not just reply, I flipped the whole chessboard on them. If you love a story where the underdog wins, make sure to subscribe. I'm Piper, and for 18 years I was a ghost in my own house. In my hometown, Cedar Hollow, people knew the Richardsons. They knew my mom, Mara, the strong widow, and they knew Grant, her golden boy destined for greatness. But a daughter, they would struggle to remember me. "Oh, Ryder," they would say, "the quiet one who left." In a place where everyone knew your business, nobody knew me. My dad died when I was 6 and Grant was 11. I only have vague memories of him. After he died, the light in our house went out. Mom did not just grieve, she completely crumbled. She rebuilt her life around a single person, Grant. My brother became her entire world. She clung to him with a desperate need. At 5 years older, he always came first. He was the sun our broken family orbited. I was just a forgotten planet, far away and cold. It was always like that. His scraped knee was a crisis. My fever was just an inconvenience. By age 10, I had learned the family rule. Do not need anything. My needs were a problem. They took attention away from Grant, and that was the one sin you could not commit. I recall the third-grade spelling bee. Back then, it was my whole world. I studied for weeks to win. I made it to the district finals. I needed Mom's signature on the form. She focused on my brother, Grant. "The B is Tuesday," I pleaded. "I cannot go," she said simply. "Grant has his geometry tutor then. He is struggling and needs me." I remembered that Dad was gone. A painful silence hung in the air. "I cannot drive you," she stated. "You must ask Mrs. Gable." I rode in our neighbor's smelly car. I won second place that night. I rushed home with my red ribbon. Mom was icing Grant's ankle. "That is nice, sweetie," she said. "Now get your brother more ice." This pattern defined my childhood. At school plays, I saw an empty seat. No one cheered for my awards. I always crossed the stage alone. She missed my days for Grant's colds, or if he just felt overwhelmed. His small needs always came first. Only one person ever really saw me. My cousin Callie Wren saw it all. She was older, sharp, and observant. Callie was more of a mother to me than my own. On my graduation day, I was the valedictorian. It was a terribly hot and humid afternoon. Sweating in my gown, I searched for my mom. I saw her on her phone, completely ignoring me. My brother Grant called because he could not find a tie. He was late for a very important job interview. Callie found me later, holding some roadside flowers. She looked me in the eye and held my shoulders. "You are the smartest one in this entire family. Piper, you are so much better than you believe. Do not let their blindness make you feel small." I whispered my thanks, trying to hold back tears. "Forget your mother," Callie interrupted quickly. "She only worships Grant. You are going to get out. You will be someone." Her words became my lifeline. At home, the narrative was completely different. Our hallway wall was nothing but a shrine to Grant. His pictures were absolutely everywhere. Grant playing baseball, Grant fishing, Grant at his prom. In the few group photos, you could barely find me. I was a blur in the corner or an elbow in the frame. One professional portrait was from when I was 12. Grant was placed front and center, right next to Mom. I stood behind them, mostly hidden by a fake fern. I honestly looked like a ghost in my own family photo. At 16, I finally asked why my photos were not there. She was folding my brother Grant's laundry at the time. "Do not be so sensitive," she said, not looking up. "We have to build up the man of the house." "I live here too," I said quietly. She just gave me a pitying look. "Honey, you know how it is. Girls leave. You will get married and start your own family." She messed up an old saying, then sighed. "The point is, boys stay. Grant is my support. He is the one who will take care of me when I am old. It is just natural to invest in him." Invest. That word told me I was a bad stock in her eyes. So I stopped asking for her love. I focused on becoming undeniable. I threw myself into my schoolwork with an absolute fury. I was not just smart, I was relentless. I woke at 4 in the morning to study and stayed late in the computer lab. I devoured books on coding and math. In the world of data and logic, everything was fair. There was no favoritism in code. If you wrote it correctly, it worked. It was simple and fair. I also got a job. I worked at the local diner, wiping tables to save money. I picked up shifts at the library and babysat for neighbors. I saved every single penny I earned. I hid it all in a hollowed-out book. When I earned a full scholarship, I thought, finally, Mom will be proud of me. I brought the acceptance letter home and put it on the table. My mom read it while stirring a pot of chili. She wiped her hands on her apron and said, "Well, that is lucky." "It is not luck, Mom," I said. "I worked hard for this. I have a 4.0 grade point average." She corrected me. "You are lucky your brain works that way. Grant is a people person. He has different gifts. Good for you, Piper. But do not ask me for money. We cannot afford dorms, not with Grant between jobs." Grant was 23 and had quit 3 jobs in 6 months. She did not respect his vision, but the money was always there for his car repairs, new clothes, and his failed investments. I really looked at her, and then something quietly snapped inside me. It was not loud. It was a final, quiet severing of the bond. I realized then that no matter what I did, I would never be enough. The game was rigged from the very start. I took my acceptance letter and slid it back into its folder. "I do not expect you to pay for anything, Mom," I said. She did not even notice the coldness in my voice. She just asked me to go buy Grant his favorite soda. So I went to the store. I bought it. I put it in the fridge. Then I went to my room, packed one bag, and stared at the wall. The empty space where my photo should have been. I made a vow on my bedroom floor that night. I would go to that school. I would build a solid life for myself. A life that would never require me to ask them for a thing. Not for their permission, their money, or their approval. I would become a success, not to show them up, but to leave them. Grant could have the wall. He could have the praise. Well, I wanted freedom. But as I lay in bed listening to the television downstairs, I realized leaving would be the easy part. The truly difficult part would be staying away. And I did not know that even from miles away, the invisible strings of family can still pull you back into the orbit of people who were supposed to love you. I had no idea that the house Grant would eventually buy, the house that started the end, was built on lies. A foundation of lies I was unknowingly paying for. All I knew then was that I was leaving for good. I imagined a world where I was finally sharp and in focus. My beautiful dream was to be on my own. But reality was about to hit me hard. Moving to Colorado was not an escape. It was a war against simple economics. My scholarship covered tuition and books. It did not cover the high cost of living. The college brochure showed a fantasy life, but the rent in Lakeview was unaffordable. I arrived with only $200. That was my entire life savings. Before I left, I tried to show my mom my budget. She completely ignored my spreadsheet. She was too busy packing for my brother, Grant. He needed things for his new luxury loft. It was for his friend's new t-shirt business. I asked for help with just my first month's rent. "I can't, Piper," she told me sharply. "Grant needs a stable home to be creative. You know how sensitive he is to his home." I kept my voice steady, though my hands shook. "I just need a loan. I promise I will pay you back." "I don't have it," she snapped without looking up. "I just wrote the check for his broker's fee." "You are the smart one, Piper. You always figure these things out." So I figured it out, just like she said. I did not move into the school dorms. I found a cheap room in a basement. It smelled of mildew and cat litter. And I shared a bathroom with 3 other girls. My life ran on a military-tight schedule. Classes were from 8 until 3. My first job started at 4. I worked at a diner called the Greasy Spoon, serving food. My shift ended at 10 at night, then I would start running. I ran 6 blocks to my next job at a gym just to save the bus fare. I worked the desk there from 11 until 3 in the morning, cleaning equipment. I only ever slept in short 4-hour bursts. My only food was burnt leftovers from the diner kitchen. That and cheap instant noodles. I quickly lost 10 pounds. In the mirror, my face looked thin and sharp. But my grades were a perfect 4.0, so I kept going. My life felt like a tightrope walk over a deep canyon. I just prayed nothing would go wrong and knock me off. Then in November, the wind blew. It began with a scratchy throat. I ignored it, but within 48 hours, I had a terrible fever. My bones ached, but I still tried to go to work. I was sweating and shaking so badly at the diner that I dropped a pitcher of water on a customer. My manager sent me home, and I lost 3 shifts of pay. Then my body finally gave out, and I slept through my alarm. The gym owner saw sickness as a weakness, so he punished me. He cut my hours for 2 weeks, right when I needed them most. I lay in my cold room, shivering and doing the math. I added up my lost wages and the cost of medicine. The rent was due very soon, and it was a huge problem. I was short $300. That number haunted me. To other students, that was nothing, just a weekend bar tab. To Grant, it was the price of new sneakers. But for me, it meant everything. It meant the difference between having a home or being evicted. When my fever broke, I felt weak and completely empty. I sat on my mattress, staring at my phone. I swore I would never do this. But pride does not keep you warm, and it certainly does not pay the rent. Swallowing my pride, I dialed my mom's number. My heart hammered in my chest as she answered the phone. She sounded happy. "Hello?" "Hey, Mom," I said, my voice raspy. "Piper, I was just telling Aunt Linda all about Grant's new plans. He wants to get into photography. He has such a great eye." "That's great, Mom," I said, gripping my phone. "Listen, I need your help. It is really important." The line went quiet. Her tone immediately turned cold and defensive. "What is it?" "I was sick," I rushed out, "and I missed some work. Because of the flu, I'm now short on this month's rent. I just need $300. I'll pay you back next month." "I promise." There was a long, cold silence on her end. I could hear a game show playing loudly in the background. "Oh, Piper," she finally sighed, her voice dripping with annoyance. "You know I would help if I could." "It is $300, Mom," I pleaded. "Please, I'm going to be evicted." "I just sent money to Grant this morning." Her voice got sharp, the way it always did when she defended him. "His car's transmission went out. He needs it for his interviews." "It was an emergency, Piper." "I am sick," I whispered, "and I'm losing my home." "Well, surely you have other options," she said dismissively. "Why can't you just ask one of your roommates for the money? Or just pick up extra shifts? You are so resourceful after all. You always land on your feet." "I am asking you," I said, my voice shaking. It was not sadness in my eyes, but pure hot anger. "I am asking my mother." "And I am telling you the money is gone," she snapped back at me. "Do not try to make me feel guilty. I am doing the best I can. You both seem to need everything from me." And then the line went dead. She hung up on me. I just sat there listening to the crushing silence. I was floored by my parents' hypocrisy. They acted like both their children needed everything. I needed $300 for rent, but they gave my brother $3,000. He wanted to fix a car he barely even used. In that instant, my last piece of childhood hope vanished. I finally understood I was completely and truly alone. No one was coming to save me. There was no safety net. My room held only thrift store clothes and a school laptop. I had nothing of value except for one thing. In a shoebox, I kept a delicate gold necklace. It had a small, heart-shaped locket from my father. He gave it to me on my 5th birthday, a year before he died. It was the only tangible piece of him I had left. I never wore it, terrified of losing the one proof I was loved. Holding the cold gold, I knew what I had to do. I walked 20 minutes to a pawn shop on the town's edge. It was a grim place with bars on the windows. The man inside looked at me with total disgust. He took the necklace and weighed it silently. "It is 18-karat gold," I said, my voice empty. "It is scrap," he grunted, 150. I told him it was worth more, but my heart was not in it. He just shrugged. "I buy metal, not stories. Take it or leave it." I tried 2 other shops with no better luck. The best offer was $200, so I took it. I sold my father's last gift to a complete stranger. He tossed it in a drawer without a second glance. Then I sold my textbooks to make the last $100. I paid my rent. That night, lying in the dark without that locket, I made a brand new vow to myself. This was not a wish. It was a solemn promise to myself. I would never again ask them for anything, not one dime. I would rather starve than beg Mara Richardson for help. So I decided to build a fortress of financial independence, one so high that no one could ever look down on me again. I would work until my hands bled and save every single cent. I would never again have to explain myself to anyone. The next morning, I started a third job on the weekends. I graded papers and cut my food budget by another 10%. I stopped seeing friends and just became a machine. A week later, a package arrived at my apartment. The handwriting was familiar, but it was not from my mom. I opened it to find groceries, protein bars, and good coffee. There was also a large bottle of multivitamins inside. Tucked into the side was a generic gift card. It had $200 on it. There was no note, but I knew it was Callie. I texted, "You did not have to do this." She replied in 3 seconds, "Won a raffle. I hate protein bars." "You take them. Heard you were sick. Drink water, you idiot." As I stared at the screen, the weight on my chest lifted. Callie always knew. She understood I would never accept charity, so she made it seem like luck, a prize she did not want. She sent the gift card instead of cash to protect my feelings. She was the only person who understood the nature of my pride. She helped me without ever making me feel small. I used the card to buy back my textbooks and kept working. The necklace was gone, and so was my childhood. But I was no longer the quiet girl left out of photos. I was steel. Poverty was sharpening me into a weapon for a fight my family had no idea was even coming. Grant had no idea she was teaching me how to survive without her. That lesson was worth far more than $300. It was priceless. My life did not change instantly like in the movies. There was no upbeat music or a sudden glamorous makeover. It was the quiet result of 1,000 small choices. I made those choices late at night while everyone else was sleeping. I graduated with honors, not because I was a genius, but because I fought for it. While my classmates planned graduation trips, I was already interviewing for jobs. I landed a junior position at Northrail DataWorks. It was a mid-sized tech company over in Lakeview. We handled the data processing for major transport companies. It was not a sexy job. We were not building the next big social media app. We were basically the plumbers of the digital world. We made sure a train's cargo data arrived at the exact same time as the train. It was not glamorous work, but that meant it was stable. More importantly, the work was complex and kept me sharp. I started as a systems analyst with a desk in a windowless corner. My first paycheck felt like I had won the lottery. To a girl who once sold her father's necklace for rent money, it was everything. It was proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. I quickly developed a reputation at Northrail. I became the person they gave the impossible task to, a messy database from the 90s. They gave it to Piper, a system error that no one could find after 3 days. They dropped that problem right on my desk. I never complained. I would just put on my headphones, brew some tea, and get to work. I treated the code with the kind of attention I wished I had received. I cleaned it up and made it better. I did not just fix the bugs, I rebuilt the system so they would not return. I spent my weekends learning new skills that were not even part of my job. I made it my business to understand our platform completely. My manager, Sarah, a tough survivor of the dot-com era, took notice. At my first review, she said I was quiet, but my code was flawless. She immediately moved me into the high-stakes world of data security. That promotion was my first big leap forward in the company. The pressure was intense, but so was the importance of the work. I began working on encryption and finding our system's weaknesses. I learned to think like a criminal in order to build stronger defenses. By the time I was 26, I had become a project manager. I was not a loud leader. I was the organized planner who got things done. My team trusted me because I protected them from bad corporate ideas. In return for my support, they always delivered excellent results. While my career was taking off, my personal life remained incredibly simple. I lived in a small apartment and drove a used car that I paid for in cash. My focus was on my work and achieving financial freedom. I managed to pay off all my student loans in just 22 months. I remember when I saw the zero balance on my screen, I did not celebrate. I just took a deep breath and felt a huge weight finally lift off me. It was a burden I had been carrying since I was 18 years old. After that, I started building my wealth, maxing out my 401k. I built a large emergency fund to cover an entire year of my expenses. I was building a financial fortress, and I stayed away from social media. I kept my online profile strictly professional and rarely checked personal accounts. But I still saw Grant's posts about his supposed success. He posted pictures of expensive dinners, calling it the grind set. The whole time, I knew he was still asking his mother for gas money. His entrepreneurial journey was just buying website names he never used. I watched his online show from a distance and felt absolutely nothing. Then at my real job, a major company pivot began. My company was secretly building a powerful new predictive algorithm. Our logistics system was a goldmine for shipping companies. When buyout rumors started, everyone else got nervous. People were afraid of being laid off. But I was not worried. I remembered my contract from when I was promoted. I had cleverly asked for stock options instead of a higher salary. Back then, those options were just a gamble on paper. But I knew how valuable our product was. After all, I had designed its security. The news finally broke. A massive company was merging with us. The value of North Rail shot up almost overnight. I was in a meeting when the CEO announced the final share price. I did the math in my head, then checked it again. My options were real. They were worth a substantial amount of money. I did not buy a fancy car or take a lavish vacation. Instead, I went to a real estate agent named Barbara. I told her I was not looking for a starter house, but a forever home. I wanted a private yard in the quiet part of Lakeview. After seeing 4 houses, I found the perfect one. It was a beautiful craftsman house set back from the road. It was hidden behind a row of tall oak trees. The backyard was peaceful and bordered a protected forest. It smelled like pine trees and fresh earth. It felt like home. The price was high, high enough to have made my younger self faint. But I put down a 40% down payment without hesitation. The mortgage was approved in record time. My hand was steady as I signed. Moving day was simple, just me and the moving crew. The house felt a little empty. But that was the point. For the first time, I had space and room to breathe. My very first stop was the local animal shelter. I walked past all the yipping puppies to a quiet cage in the back. He was a scruffy shepherd mix with sad, intelligent eyes and a scar. The volunteer called him Milo. He was a quiet, loyal rescue. He had a rough start in life. I said, I will take him. Milo came home with me that very same afternoon. He explored the entire backyard, then sat right at my feet. We sat on the porch as the sun went down, 2 survivors. I did not tell my mom, and I did not tell Grant. I knew my success would instantly become our success. Mom would brag to neighbors about the house we bought. Grant would see me not as a sister, but as a bank, a personal bank for his bad ideas. I only told one person. I invited Callie over a week after I had moved in. I sent her the address, but no other information. She pulled up in her old sedan, her eyes wide with shock. I waited on the porch with 2 coffees. Milo was with me. She walked up slowly, staring at the house, then at me. Okay, she whispered. Who did you kill? I actually laughed. It was a real easy laugh. Nobody. I just worked so hard. This is yours, she asked. You really own this place? You are not just house sitting for some rich boss? It is mine, I said. Only my name is on the deed. Her eyes filled with tears. She walked to a porch pillar. She slapped it with her palm just to test if it was real. Then she turned and gave me a bone-crushing hug. I knew it, she whispered. I told you we would be something. You did, I said, hugging her back. We sat there for hours. I told her about the company merger and the stock options. I described the years of eating ramen just to get here. Does Marla know? Callie asked after a long silence. No, I said firmly, and she is never going to know. To my family, I am just doing okay. A steady job is all they know. Callie called it smart. Grant's jobless again, and Mom is paying his rent. I said, I know, that is why there is a gate. They would drain you dry, she warned me. If they knew about this, Grant would move right in, and Mom would start redecorating. I know. This house is a vault, Cal. My vault. I looked at Callie, who only brought me flowers. not demands. But you are always welcome here. You can have a key anytime. She smiled gratefully. I might need it. My neighbor plays the trumpet. That evening, watching the sunset, I felt at peace. I had finally done it. I had broken the family cycle. My life was now safe from the chaos of Cedar Hollow. I had a respected job and a home that was my sanctuary. I had a loving dog and a very healthy bank account. No more fearing a $300 emergency. I thought I was safe. I thought I had finally escaped them. But I had underestimated their destructive pull. Just because I escaped did not mean they stopped looking for fuel. While I was building my fortress, Grant was lighting a match. He planned to use my credit history as the kindling. It was quiet in Lakeview, but a storm was brewing in Missouri, and I was about to be pulled right into the middle of it. The notification came on a Tuesday afternoon at work. My phone, which was usually silent, began to buzz. The buzzing was persistent. It would not stop. It vibrated on the desk once, twice, 3 times. A frantic rhythm that meant a server crash or a family emergency. I flipped it over. It was the family group chat, a place I had muted years ago. For some reason, I could never bring myself to actually leave it. Messages were flooding the screen with excitement. Grant bought a house. My family was so proud. They had attached a photo. It showed Grant and his girlfriend, Paige Larkin, in front of a new home. Grant was holding up a key, shouting in a fake roar of victory. Paige leaned against him, her tight smile never quite reaching her eyes. It was a smile just for the camera. In the door's reflection, my mother looked absolutely ecstatic. I just stared at the screen as a knot formed in my stomach. My internal calculator, which never really turns off, started crunching the numbers. Grant had been unemployed for the last 8 months. Before that, his job was with a company that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. On top of that, the housing market was brutal. Interest rates were near 7%, and banks wanted 20% down. They also required credit scores over 750. The last time I saw Grant's score, it was in the low 500s. The math just did not make any sense. In my line of work, that means someone is hiding a key detail. I typed a quick congratulations and put my phone away. But that cold, uneasy feeling stayed with me. 2 weeks later, I drove to Cedar Hollow for the housewarming party my mother planned. She insisted it was a chance for the family to celebrate something big. She said I needed to see what real success looked like. The insult was clear. My own paid-off home in the quiet woods apparently did not count as a success because there was no big celebration. Grant's house was in a new development called The Willows, about 20 minutes from town. It was one of those instant neighborhoods built on what used to be farmland. When I turned onto a street, I was taken aback by the sight. The eerie uniformity was unsettling, with every house painted a dull beige or gray. Each lawn was the exact same shade of chemical green. The young trees, held up by wires, were too thin to cast a shadow. It was perfect, like a movie set, beautiful but fragile. You got the sense that if you leaned on a wall, it might just fall over. I parked behind Mom's old sedan. Grant's car, a leased luxury sport utility vehicle, was showcased in the open garage for the whole world to see. Grant met me at the door wearing a blazer over a t-shirt, a look he probably thought screamed tech billionaire. To me, it just screamed that he was trying way too hard. "Piper!" he shouted, pulling me into a stiff hug. He smelled of cheap cologne and nervous sweat. "Welcome to the estate," he bragged. "Shoes off. The floors are imported hardwood." I took off my boots and stepped onto the gray laminate. It was vinyl, not wood at all. The hollow plastic click under my socks gave it away instantly. "It is nice, Grant," I said, looking at the massive, echoing living room. It was empty except for a single oversized leather sofa and an 80-inch television. There were no books, no personal photos, just the strong smell of new paint. "It is an investment," Grant announced, puffing out his chest. "We needed to park our capital somewhere safe." He guaranteed it would appreciate 10% by next year. What capital, I wanted to ask. Instead, I said, "So how is the consulting business? You must have some big clients for a place like this." His eyes darted away from mine for a split second. "Oh, it is booming. I have signed a few non-disclosure agreements, so I cannot discuss specifics." He then mumbled something about high-level crypto adjacencies. It was a word salad that meant absolutely nothing. Just then, Mom walked out from the kitchen, a tray of appetizers. She looked frantic, her face flushed, and her hands were shaking. She was running on adrenaline and denial. "Piper, you have to see this kitchen," she exclaimed, spinning around. "Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. It is a dream." "It is really beautiful, Mom," I said gently. "Grant bought this for our future," she said, squeezing his arm tightly. "He wants a place big enough for the whole family during holidays. He is just so good to me." I watched Grant puff up with pride. He did not look like a good provider. He looked like a man about to fall. Just then, Paige appeared. Paige Larkin treated life like a beauty contest she was determined to win. She was a petite blonde in a dress that was way too formal for the occasion. "Piper," she squealed, coming over to give me an air kiss. "So glad you could make it. We were just saying what a shame it is you are all alone in that big house. It must get so terribly lonely." "I enjoy the quiet," I replied, my voice even. "Oh, sure," Paige cooed, dripping with fake pity. "But every woman needs some stability. Grant is such a rock. It is so wonderful to have a man take charge, you know? Maybe someday you will find someone who wants to settle down too." The message was crystal clear. I was the problem, the cautionary tale. Meanwhile, Grant, with his leased car, was the picture of success. The party was a very strange event. It was only me, Mom, Grant, Paige, and a couple of Grant's friends. They spent the entire time on the patio talking loudly about their business ventures. I decided to walk through the house, letting my analyst brain take over. The furniture was all rented. I saw the tag under the sofa when I dropped my napkin. The refrigerator was almost completely bare, except for some champagne, a six-pack of beer, and leftover takeout. There was no real food, nothing. This place was not a home. It was a stage set. I headed toward the back of the house to find the bathroom. I passed by a room set up as an office. The door was partly open. Inside, I saw Mom and Grant standing near a desk. They had not seen me. I paused, my instincts screaming, "I just do not understand why this one too?" Mom's voice was tiny and trembling. "I already signed at the bank, Mom. Just listen," Grant said, his voice now a low, urgent whisper. "This is only for the insurance. It's just a formality. The bank needs a second signature because of the market." "But it says I am the guarantor," she whispered back. "That's just legal talk," Grant snapped, then quickly softened. "It just proves who I am." "Mom, do you want me to lose the house?" "The deal will fall apart if you do not sign this. Paige will be crushed. I will look like a complete fool." "No, no, of course not," Mom said immediately. "Then just sign it. Trust me, I am handling everything." I heard the pen scratch against paper. My heart pounded. Guarantor did not mean insurance. It meant she was co-signing the loan. I ran to the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I stared at my reflection, splashing cold water on my face. I told myself to stay out of it, just like I had promised. But all the numbers and facts I knew were screaming at me. When I left the bathroom, the kitchen felt strangely cheerful. Mom was laughing too hard as Grant poured everyone champagne. I walked to the kitchen island to get a glass of water. Beside the fruit bowl was a messy stack of mail. Most of it was junk, but one envelope stood out. It was at the bottom, partly hidden, with a bright red stamp. The stamp read, "Urgent." I quickly looked around. Grant was busy telling a story. Paige and Mom were distracted. With my little finger, I slid the junk mail away. The envelope was from a credit card company I knew. They were famous for their high interest rates and shady deals, the kind they offer to people who are already in trouble. The little window on the envelope was ripped, as if someone tore it open in a rush. I could clearly see the street address, and I knew it was this exact house. The last name Richardson was visible, but the first name was completely gone. It could have been for Grant, or it could have been for our mom, Marla. But as I stared at the jagged paper, a cold dread washed over me. The space for the first name seemed too long. Longer than Grant, or even Marla. I snatched my hand back when Paige looked up. "Piper, what do you think?" She held up two fabric squares, velvet or linen. I automatically chose linen. "Velvet is a dust magnet," I said. Paige laughed and called me practical. She told my mom I had absolutely no sense of romance. About an hour later, I made an excuse about an early meeting and left. I simply could not stay in that house a moment longer. The air felt heavy, and I felt like I could not breathe. Grant walked me to my car. He was a little drunk by then, with a flushed face. "See, Piper," he slurred, "I told you I would make it. I have a huge house and a beautiful girl." "This is a lot of house," I said, choosing my words with care. "The mortgage must be huge." He just waved his hand. "It is nothing." I just nodded and said congratulations. As I backed out of the long driveway, I watched him wave in my rearview mirror. He looked so small. He was like a little baby playing dress-up in a world he could not afford. I drove in complete silence for the first hour, my thoughts racing. I kept hearing the loan officer's words. "The guarantor is just a formality." My mother could never afford to cover a mortgage payment this large. With that collection letter on the counter, I knew it was not a matter of if he defaulted, but when. The bank would come after our mother. They would take her retirement money. They would take her small, paid-for house. But that was not my only fear. My knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel. It was all about that torn envelope. Why would Grant tear the name off a bill? He was trying to hide something. He did not want anyone to see who that bill was actually for. My phone was on the dashboard, and then all of a sudden the music just stopped. Then a notification popped onto my screen. But it was not a text message. It was from my identity protection app, a service I paid $20 a month for just to be safe. The alert read, "New credit inquiry detected." I quickly pulled my car over to the side of the highway. The sound of gravel crunched under my tires. My heart was pounding. I opened the app, my hands shaking. The screen finally loaded. Midwest Regional Mortgage Lenders. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I had not applied for a mortgage. I had not authorized anyone to check my credit history. I scrolled down. The address listed was 1402 Oak Creek Drive. It was Grant's address. The air in my car felt ice cold. He hadn't just used our mom. I sat there, stunned, as huge 18-wheelers thundered past me, making my small car shake. The horrible truth became clear. Someone had used my name, my social security number, and my perfect credit to try and get a loan for that house. It was Grant. When Mom's money wasn't enough, he tried to use me too. I did not scream or cry. Instead, a strange sense of calm washed over me. It was like spotting the single error in a long line of computer code. This was not a family problem. This was a crime. As I pulled back onto the highway, I knew one thing for sure. The next time I saw my brother, it would not be for a friendly dinner. It would be for a war. I drove the rest of the way in silence, planning my next move. If Grant wanted to play a game with numbers, he was about to discover he was up against an expert. He thought he had bought himself a new house. He had actually bought a one-way ticket to his own ruin, and I was going to be the one to validate it. I sat in my dark office, the blue glow of 3 monitors on my face. My dog Milo was sleeping on the floor next to me, his soft breathing the only sound besides the quiet hum of my computers. It was 2 in the morning. I was wide awake. My 4-hour drive was fueled by cold fury. Anger sharpened my focus. I was not just a sister. I was an analyst investigating a security breach. I began with the alert from my phone. I logged into the credit bureau's secure portal. The keyboard clicked as I pulled the full report. There it was, a hard inquiry from a lender. Dated yesterday, status, denied. I finally could breathe. The denial was not because the bank had a conscience. It was because 3 years ago, I protected myself. I had placed a permanent freeze on my credit. It was a standard precaution in data security. A 16-digit PIN was required to lift it. The code was safe in my password manager. Grant or his broker tried using my number. They hit the wall I built. It was proof. This was the smoking gun. It was no accident. You do not get a joint mortgage by mistake. It was identity theft. I took a screenshot. I saved it to a new desktop folder. I labeled it the case. Grant was desperate. He had likely exhausted every other option. I switched to the county assessor's website. Public records can be a beautiful thing. Property ownership here is public record. You only need an internet connection and patience. I typed in the address, Oak Creek Drive. I found Lot 42 and clicked the link. It was recorded only 48 hours ago. I paid $5 and downloaded the deed. I scrolled right past the legal jargon. On the last page, my stomach dropped. There were two signatures. The first was Grant's. His was a sprawling, arrogant scrawl. My mom's was tiny and shaky. Mara Richardson. Underneath her name was one typed word, co-borrower, not just a character witness. I felt sick. This was not just an insurance form. Grant had lied. She was on the deed and the loan. That meant she was 100% liable. If Grant missed a payment, they would call her. They could take her wages or even her house, her small home in Cedar Hollow. I went back to page 1. The loan was for $450,000. The rate started at 7.5%. I did the math in my head. Done. The payment was huge, over $3,500. Mom made under $40,000 a year. She was a receptionist. Grant made absolutely nothing. How was this approved? I had to find out. I used a professional background check service. It was expensive, but it was legitimate. I ran a search on Grant. The results were instant. It was a waterfall of red flags. His credit score was 520. He had 3 credit cards currently in collections. A landlord had a $4,000 judgment. He even had a jet ski repossessed years ago. His credit was toxic. No bank would ever lend him money. So that is why he needed my mom. He had used her pristine credit score for the loan. He was using my mom to stay afloat. I investigated his girlfriend, Paige. Her past was a total disaster. A failed business, always moving. The state closed it for unpaid taxes. She was even being sued for theft. They were gambling with my mother's future. I went back to the mortgage papers. The down payment was missing. They needed thousands for the house. With bad credit, maybe 20%. Grant did not have that money. He was broke. Then I saw a form. It was a document called a gift letter. It proves money received is a gift. It is not a loan that must be repaid. It said my mom, Mara, gifted $60,000 to Grant. I froze. My mom had no money. She lived paycheck to paycheck. She barely heated her house to save. Where did that money come from? Then I knew. Her 401k and her small life insurance policy. I logged into her insurance account. I remembered her password. I found the transaction history. 2 weeks ago, she closed the policy. The payout was $18,000, but that was not $60,000. Then it hit me. Her retirement fund, her modest 401k. I couldn't access it, but I could tell something was very wrong. So I went back to public records, searching under her name. That's when I found it. A recent lien against her personal property. It was for a predatory, high-interest loan she took out last month. She had not just drained all her savings for him. She had taken on massive debt to cover the down payment. She was probably hoping Grant's fantasy investments would pay it off. I leaned back in my chair. The silence in the room was deafening. The whole horrible picture was now perfectly clear. This was not a house. It was a financial trap set by my brother. Grant, with no income, used our mother's entire life savings. He took the money meant to keep her safe in her old age. He had pressured her into co-signing a loan she could never afford. The monthly payment was more than her whole paycheck. When the bank still hesitated because of Grant's terrible credit, he tried to throw me into the fire with them. He actually tried using my name to seal his crooked deal. If I hadn't frozen my credit, I would be legally tied to this mess. The clock read 4:30 in the morning. I started printing. I printed the credit denial with my name on it. I printed the deed of trust with my mom's signature. I printed Grant's court judgments and Paige's tax liens, the gift letter, the life insurance surrender. I printed it all. I organized everything into a professional binder with dividers. I labeled each section, identity theft attempt, the co-signing trap, financial insolvency, liquidation of a lifetime's assets. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a forensic audit. And my mom was the victim, happily picking out curtains, with no idea she had already lost everything. A coldness settled in my heart. The guilt I had carried for years had turned to ice in my chest. But this new coldness brought me a powerful sense of clarity. My mom had chosen the son who lied over the daughter who told the truth. She had picked the fantasy of her perfect, successful son. I finally saw how my brother Grant had completely tricked her. He had used her love as a weapon to drain her of everything. I stared at the thick binder, which was heavy with facts. Thanksgiving at Grant's new house was only 2 days away. I looked at the dinner invitation on my calendar. I was not canceling. I snapped the binder shut with a loud, satisfying crack. I would go to dinner and eat the dry turkey. I would compliment the expensive curtains he could not afford. And when the moment was just right, I had a plan. I was going to place this binder right on the table. It was too late to save them. All the money was gone. But I would make sure they knew that I knew the whole truth. My brother would have no more shadows left to hide in. I reached down and patted my dog Milo on his head. His tail thumped just once. "It is okay, buddy," I whispered. I turned off the monitors, and the room went completely dark. But my mom's signature burned in my mind like a brand. Mara Richardson, co-borrower. It was her own undoing. My brother had handed her the pen. The turkey was dry. An overcooked lump sat in the center of the huge table, but my mom praised it like it was a gourmet masterpiece. We were all seated in the formal dining room of the new house. The house on Oak Creek Drive was enormous and cold. The modern gray paint was supposed to be stylish but felt sad. My mom had to bring her own china since Grant had none. He only owned paper plates. There were 12 of us there. Grant, Paige, Aunt Linda, and Uncle Bob were at the table, along with a few cousins who were more focused on the football game in the living room. My tote bag was under the table with the binder resting against my leg. I could feel the hard edge of it right through my jeans. It was a heavy weight, like a bomb waiting for the right moment. Grant stood to carve the turkey in a crisp white shirt. His rolled-up sleeves showed off a watch that looked expensive, but I knew for a fact it was a knockoff he bought online. He tapped a fork against his wine glass, and the sharp ring silenced the room. "Family," Grant began with a PMU politician's smile. "I just want to say how wonderful it is to have you all in my new home. It has been a long road with a lot of hard work and late nights. But seeing you all at this table makes the hustle worth it." "Hear, hear, Didier," Uncle Bob shouted, raising his beer glass. "My son, the homeowner," Mom said, her voice trembling with pride. She reached out and squeezed Grant's available hand. "I always knew you were meant for big things, Grant." I sipped my cheap wine. It tasted like vinegar and oak. I swallowed it down, letting the burns settle deep in my stomach. Watching them felt like seeing a play where the actors did not know the entire set was about to go up in flames. "It is not just about the house," Grant continued, loving the attention. "It is about building a legacy. I told Paige we were planting a flag. This is where the Richardson name will finally mean something." I glanced at Paige, who was beaming beside him. She looked at Grant with a gaze that was part adoration, part calculation. "You are so inspiring, babe," Paige cooed at him. Then her eyes landed on me, and her warm look turned to pity. "Isn't he inspiring, Piper? To do all this before he turns 35. "It is certainly something," I said, looking down at my plate. "The market is tough right now. Interest rates are so high." Grant just laughed, waving the knife. "Oh, Piper and her numbers. Always the analyst," he scoffed. "You have to see the big picture." He lectured. "Scared money does not make money, sis." "Is that right?" I asked. "I thought wealth was built by paying your bills." The table went quiet. My mom jumped in with a nervous smile. "Piper works very hard too, Grant," she said, her tone weak. "She made my career sound like a child's art project." "It is data security, Mom," I corrected her gently. "Right, computers," she said. "But look, Grant bought this beautiful turkey." Grant puffed out his chest. "Only the best, top of the line." "Free range and organic, of course," he added with a nod. I knew he was lying. I had seen the store brand wrapper in the trash. But I stayed quiet. I just ate my food and waited. The family chat moved on to the usual gossip and complaints. Aunt Linda discussed her hip, while Uncle Bob griped about gas prices. Through it all, the family power structure was crystal clear. Grant was the king at the table, and my mom was the queen mother. I was expected to be the audience and applaud his success. But I did not applaud. I just ate, watched, and waited. Then his wife Paige leaned forward, her cheeks red from wine. So, Piper, she said loudly, cutting through the chatter, I see you came alone again. Is there anyone special? Or are you still just completely focused on your career? I wiped my mouth. I'm very happy, Paige. I have a full life. But are you actually seeing anyone? She pushed. You are almost 30. You know, that clock is ticking fast. It must be so lonely in that big city all by yourself. I have my dog Milo, my friends, and a job I love, Tush, I said. A dog is not a husband, honey, Aunt Linda chimed in. Paige chimed in. Exactly. We just worry about you, Piper. We want you to have this kind of happiness, she said. She gestured around the room at the rented furniture and the lies. I am fine, I said, my voice completely steady. Really? My mom set her fork down with a loud clatter. Her eyes narrowed, annoyed. She had had enough. She wanted me to admit that he had won. You know, Piper, she said using her lecture tone, Paige is right. You spend all your time with those machines. It makes you cold. Look at your brother. He took a risk. He bought this beautiful house. He's providing a wonderful place for our family to gather. She paused to make sure everyone was listening. Then she turned back to me, ready to deliver her big line. It was a line she had clearly been rehearsing all week long. Your brother bought a house. When are you going to settle down? The question hung in the air like a judgment. It suggested my independence was a failure. It suggested my lack of a husband was a deep character flaw. I looked at the woman who sold her life insurance just 2 weeks ago. The woman who signed a loan she could never afford to repay. She loved the idea of her son more than her own reality. My anger disappeared. It was replaced by a cold, clear resolve. I placed my fork down and folded my hands on the table. I am settled, Mom, I said. My voice was quiet but carried. Grant snorted, then took a huge bite of his dinner roll. He chewed with his mouth open. Settled? You live in a small house in the woods. You are all alone with a mom and a laptop. That is just hiding, Paige giggled. It is a little hermit-like. I own my home, Ba, I said, looking straight at Grant. I pay the mortgage by myself with money that I earned. I have a real retirement fund, and I have zero credit card debt. Grant's chewing stopped. His eyes went cold. What are you implying, Piper? If you were jealous, just say it. We can talk about it. I said, I am not jealous, Grant. I'm simply worried. My mother scoffed. Worried about what? We are celebrating. Why do you always have to be a dark cloud? Just be happy for him. Because I know the math, Mom, I answered calmly. Grant let out a nervous laugh. Here comes the human calculator. Go ahead, Piper. Bore us all with your spreadsheets. I touched my bag. I did not need the binder for this part. I know what being truly settled feels like, I said. It is sleeping soundly because you know the bills are paid. It is not having to hide overdue notices from your guests. Grant's face went completely white. He dropped his food. Paige looked confused. What are you talking about? I turned to her. I am talking about real stability. Not the kind you rent for a party or sign for on a loan. Not because you are afraid of looking like a failure. Mom slammed her hand on the table. That is enough. You are being rude. If you cannot be supportive, be quiet. I have been quiet for 29 years, Mom, I said. Quiet when my college fund paid for Grant's car. And quiet when I sold Dad's necklace to pay my rent. Mom gasped. You sold that? But I told you to send Grant money. She faltered as all our relatives stared directly at her. I did what I had to do. I learned to take care of myself. And that is how I know an asset from a liability. I looked at Grant, who was glaring at me with pure venom. You think your boring corporate job makes you better than me? He hissed, I am building an empire. You are just a drone. I replied softly, an empire requires capital, Grant. It needs cash. I have credit, Grant shouted, standing. My name is on the deed. Is it? I asked. Complete silence fell. Of course it is, he finally yelled. It is a beautiful house, I said, but you didn't get it by yourself. Piper, stop, my mother pleaded. Why? You compared me directly to him. You asked why I do not have this. I let the heavy silence stretch. Because I don't need a cosigner. Grant's hands balled into angry fists. Get out. I am leaving now. But first, a word on your empire. I reached slowly into my bag. I only pulled out a single paper. The deed I printed at 4 in the morning. I am happy for you, Grant says, "Well, but yet my voice was a very quiet whisper. But let's not pretend you bought this. I know you tried to use my name." Grant suddenly looked terribly sick. Paige just looked absolutely terrified. "I know who is really paying for it." I tapped the paper. "It cost her everything." I stood, although my legs were shaking. I felt like I had just lit a bomb. For once in my life, I didn't care. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said, and then left. The deed sat there like a tombstone. The bomb had dropped. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. It felt like all the air had been sucked out. Grant was the first one to break it with a strange, choked laugh. He jumped up so fast his chair screeched against the floor. "She's lying," he yelled, gesturing wildly to the whole room. His face and neck were covered in angry red blotches. "This is so typical of Piper. She can't stand to see me succeed. She eats my food, then it tries to humiliate me with fake papers. She probably just printed those from the internet." Paige's shrill voice agreed. "Who brings a contract to Thanksgiving? That's just crazy." I saw Aunt Linda nodding, her lips tight with disapproval. "Piper, honey, this is too much. Why are you trying to spoil your brother's big day?" Uncle Bob grunted. "She's just jealous. Always has been. That girl has a massive chip on her shoulder." I could feel the story shifting right before my eyes. They were turning me into the villain, the bitter sister. It was the same role they'd given me for the last 20 years. I didn't argue or raise my voice. I just reached into my tote bag. "Callie," I said calmly, "could you please come here for a moment?" She had been watching the entire scene with wild, intelligent eyes. Callie stood and walked directly over to my side. I pulled out a heavy binder, a solid brick of undeniable truth. I opened it to the first tab. "Read this, please," I said quietly. Callie looked down, her eyes quickly scanning the credit report summary. Her eyebrows shot up. She glanced at Grant, then looked back at the paper. In a clear voice, she read, "Grant Richardson, credit score, 520, status, high risk, past due on 3 accounts for $12,400. "That's a lie," Grant screamed. "That information is old." I simply said, "Turn the page, Callie." She flipped to the next document. Deed of trust, recorded date November 25th. Borrowers are Grant Richardson and Mara Richardson. Status is joint tenants. The loan type is an adjustable rate mortgage. 7.5%, Mara? Aunt Linda asked. "You said you only helped with the insurance." My mom's face went white. She sat completely frozen. She stared blankly, her knuckles white on her napkin. "Callie, turn to the last tab," I said. Callie turned the page, giving my mom a look of pity. "Retirement account withdrawal," she read. "Net amount, $42,000. Life insurance surrender, $18,000. Beneficiary removed, Piper Richardson." The room fell silent. I took the binder back from Callie's hands. I placed it in the center of the table for all to see. "This is not fake, Grant. It is all public record. This is math, and math does not care about your feelings." "You hacked me," Grant yelled, pointing at me. "Mom, call the police." "I did not hack anything," I answered calmly. "You used my social security number, so I ran a background check. I got a fraud alert about furniture, and I investigated." I turned to my mom. She looked completely broken. "Mom, do you understand that you are his co-borrower?" She was silent. "That means when he misses a payment," I continued, "and he will, with no job and bad debt, all $12,000 of it, the bank will come for you. They will not ask nicely. They will freeze your accounts. They will take your wages directly from the clinic. You cashed out everything. You have no safety net. You have nothing left." Grant roared, "Stop it. You are just trying to scare her. I have investments." "Show me," I said flatly. "Show everyone right now. Open your banking app, Grant. Show us the income." Grant froze, stammering, "My funds are all tied up." No, they are not complicated, I replied calmly. They are empty. You are broke, Grant. You have been broke for years. You have been living off our mother, completely bleeding her dry. And now you have tricked her into taking on this massive debt. You are just jealous. Well, Grant screamed, his only defense. You are jealous because Mom has always believed in me. He called me a bitter, lonely person who wanted everyone to be miserable. I am not jealous, I said, letting my anger finally show. I am disgusted. How dare you, Paige hissed, standing up quickly. She smoothed her dress, trying to act morally superior. This is family, Piper. You are supposed to support family. Look at your mother. You are breaking her heart. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Me? I am breaking her heart? I am trying to stop this disaster. You two are the ones causing it. We are building a future, Paige cried out desperately. You are building a fantasy, I corrected her firmly, and you used our mother's entire retirement fund to pay for it. I turned to my mom, who had silent tears streaming down her face. Mom, I said gently, tell them. Did you know you were signing for a loan? Or did Grant tell you it was just some kind of formality? Her eyes were red and terrified as she looked to Grant for help. She was desperately hoping he would give her a lie to believe in. But Grant just stared at the floor, his jaw clenched in silence. He said, Mom whispered, her voice barely audible. He told me the bank just needed a simple character reference. She began to sob. To prove that he came from good people. He said if I did not sign, it would mean that I did not trust him. What about the $60,000, I asked. An investment, she wept. He promised he would pay me back double in just 6 months. Appreciate. He promised, I said flatly, just like he always promises, to pay you back for the car. Like when he promised to repay you for the car. Credit cards 3 years ago. I looked at Aunt Linda. Her mouth was hanging open. Uncle Bob was staring at Grant with a look of dawning horror. He lied to you, Mom. I said he looked you in the face and he lied. He put you on the deed because his credit is garbage. He took your retirement money because he doesn't have a dime. He didn't buy a house. You bought a house and you bought it for a man who can't even pay for his own turkey. You shut up. Grant lunged forward, grabbing the binder off the table. He threw it across the room. It hit the wall with a loud thud, papers scattering across the floor like dead leaves. You don't know anything. You think you are so superior because you have money. Money isn't everything. Money is survival, Grant, I snapped. Money is the reason Mom won't be able to retire. Money is the reason she's going to lose her house in Cedar Hollow when you default on this monstrosity. Money is the reason I am standing here telling you that you are a predator. I am her son, Grant screamed, his face twisted. I love her. You love yourself, I said. You love the way she looks at you. You love that she never says no. That isn't love, Grant. That is consumption. You are eating her alive. Get out, Paige shrieked. Get out of our house. It is not your house, I said calmly. It is the bank's house and Mom's house. I walked over to where the papers had scattered. I didn't pick them up. I just looked at them. I am not letting you rewrite history anymore, I said, addressing the room. For 20 years, I have been the bad guy. I have been the cold one. I have been the one who abandoned the family. But looking at this, I gestured to the wreckage of financial documents on the floor. I realize I didn't abandon you. I escaped. Piper, Mom said, her voice shaking. Please help him. He is your brother. We can fix this. You are successful. You can help us figure this out. I looked at her. It was the moment I had dreaded, the moment I knew was coming, the pivot, the shift from denial to begging. No, I said. Mom flinched as if I had slapped her. What? No, I said again. I will not fix this. I will not pay the mortgage. I'm not giving him a loan, and I will not bail him out. But he's your brother, Mom cried. Family is supposed to help family. Family doesn't steal from family, I said. Grant committed a felony when he tried to steal my identity. Mom, I could call the police on him right now. The only reason I haven't is because I don't want to spend Thanksgiving filling out paperwork. He was just desperate, she sobbed. And that makes it okay, I asked. Because he needs it. He can just take it? That has been the story of our lives. Grant needs, so Grant takes. And me, I just have to deal with it. I looked at Grant, who was slumped against the wall. He looked small and defeated, his perfect image finally crumbling. I am done dealing with it, I declared. I am not your safety net. I am not your backup plan, and I am not your co-signer. I turned to Callie, who looked at me with fierce pride. I'm leaving, I said. Callie, are you coming? Absolutely, she said, grabbing her purse as I walked to the door. I turned back one last time. Mom, you should get a lawyer, not for Grant, for you, because the bank will be calling. You're going to need someone who can actually read a contract. Piper, Mom screamed, reaching for me. Don't leave. We are a family. No, I said calmly, we are just people who share a last name. And right now, even that feels like too much. I opened the door. The cold November air felt sharp and clean. I walked down the steps right past my brother's fancy leased car. Callie jumped into the passenger seat next to me. I know. As I started the engine, my hands were steady. My heart was calm. I never once looked back at the house. I knew they were watching from the window, but I just drove. Holy cow, Callie said as we pulled away. That was like a scene from a movie. It was necessary, I said. Are you really not going to help them? Callie asked quietly. I just did, I replied, merging onto the highway. I told them the truth. That is the only help they're ever getting from me again. But as I drove, the image of my mother's face lingered. Her shattered expression told me this was not over. I knew the truth was a weapon, and the problem with dropping a bomb is that you eventually have to walk through the rubble. I had a feeling the debris would reach me in Colorado. When I got home, the silence in my house felt different. My once peaceful sanctuary now felt tense. It was like the heavy quiet right before a clap of thunder. I knew the storm had not passed. I had just outrun the first wave. For 3 days, my phone sat on the counter like a threat. I worked and walked Milo, but I was constantly braced for impact. I knew they would not let me have the last word. People like Grant and my mother do not live in reality. They just reshape it to fit their own story. The call finally came on a Tuesday evening as I made dinner. The rhythmic chopping of vegetables was my only comfort. When Mom lit up the screen, I hesitated. I let it ring 4 times, took a deep breath, and then answered. I said, "Hello?" There was no greeting back from her, no apology, nothing, just panic. They called me Piper. Her voice was thin and shaky, trying and failing to sound calm. The bank called. A Mr. Henderson was very rude. I told you they would call, I said, leaning against my counter. He said there is a problem with the down payment, she rushed on. She mentioned verifying funds in the bridge loan. He used all these words I did not understand. It is all a mess. It is not a mess, I stated calmly. It is fraud. They are catching on. Well, you need to fix it, she demanded. I froze. The sheer nerve of her command was breathtaking. Excuse me? You need to fix it, she repeated, her voice firm. She said it like I had just spilled a glass of milk. You are good with numbers. To handle contracts. Call this Mr. Henderson and convince him that Grant has great potential. If you explain it clearly, they will believe your professional tone. A dark laugh rose in my throat. So you want me to commit fraud? You want me to lie to a lender to fix Grant's mess? I want you to help your family, she snapped. Grant is a wreck. He is so stressed. He says if this deal falls through, he loses the house. He loses the deposit, Piper. That is my $60,000. I know it is your money, I said, just as I told you at dinner. Then please do something, she cried. You have money and a good job. Just talk to them. Or maybe offer a small guarantee until Grant's money comes through. I closed my eyes as the room started to spin. Mom, my voice grew deeper. Do you remember when I was 19? What? She said impatiently. What does that have to do with this? I was 19, I repeated. I had the flu, lying on a mattress in a moldy basement. I needed $300 for rent so I would not be homeless. I called and begged you. Oh, for goodness sake, she sighed. Not this again. I already told you I did not have it. You had it, I said. You sent it to Grant to fix a car he never even drove. You told me to just figure it out. Then you hung up on me. I did my best, she yelled. It was a tough time. Why do you hold on to things? You are so unforgiving. I was a single mom just trying to stay afloat. You were not keeping everything afloat, I said. You were keeping Grant afloat. I was drowning and you just watched. And look at you now, she said proudly. You are successful. It obviously made you stronger. So really, I did you a favor. That was it. That was the line that cut the final chord. It was her twisted version of history where her neglect was some brilliant plan to build my character. I am not helping you, I said flatly. I am not calling the bank. I am not sending money. I am not co-signing. So you are just going to let me lose everything? She asked, her voice trembling. Her voice dropped to a whisper. So you'll just let your own mother become homeless? I am not doing this to you, I said. Grant did this, and you allowed it. You signed those documents without even reading them. You're cold, she spat. Grant was right. You have a heart of stone. I suggest you get a lawyer, Mom, a bankruptcy attorney. I do not need a lawyer, she screamed back at me. I need my daughter. You do not have a daughter, I said. You have an unfunded retirement plan. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with pure adrenaline. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you are so smart, do not you? I knew immediately it was Grant. I had already blocked his number, but I should have known he would find another way to contact me. You disrespected me in my home and turned Mom against me. You are a bitter, lonely woman, and you are dead to me. I hope you rot in that house with your dog. You ruined my happiness. If I lose this house, it is all on you. It was classic Grant. There was no accountability, only projection. He was the victim. He truly believed I was the sole architect of his problems. I did not reply. Instead, I took a screenshot from my records. I saved it in my evidence folder. An hour later, the phone rang again. It was Paige. I almost ignored it, but my curiosity took over. I had to know what angle she was going to play. Hello, Paige, I said. Piper. Her voice was overly sweet. She sounded as if we were best friends planning to get together for lunch. I am so glad you picked up. I know dinner got a little heated. The holidays are just so stressful, are not they? It was not stress, Paige, I said flatly. It was fraud. She laughed nervously. Oh, you are being so dramatic. Grant is very sorry. He is just stressed. He is under a lot of pressure. What do you want, Paige? I asked. We were talking, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. And we really want you to be part of the wedding. We want you to be a bridesmaid, maybe even maid of honor. Let's fix things, she offered. I stayed completely silent. She rushed to fill the quiet space. Since you are family, we were hoping for a private arrangement. The bank is making our bridge loan difficult. If you could just lend us $20,000 for 3 months, it would make everything so smooth for the wedding. The request was so transactional, it was almost impressive. She was offering me a spot in a doomed wedding party, all for a $20,000 ticket on a sinking ship. Paige, I said, my voice firm, I will not give you money. I will not lend it, and I will not co-sign. Her voice turned to a whine. But if we lose the house, we will have to get an apartment. It would be so humiliating. Grant cannot handle that. I don't care, I replied. How can you be so selfish, she snapped. You have so much, you would not even miss it. I earned it, I said, and I am keeping it. Her voice turned to ice. You will regret this. When Grant finally makes it big, you are going to be begging. And we will not let you back in. You will be all alone. I like being alone, I said. It is quiet and cheap. Then I hung up. For the next 2 days, my phone was a battlefield. Aunt Linda sent a long Facebook message about forgiveness. She warned that God watches those who hoard wealth. Uncle Bob's voicemail called me a disgrace for upsetting my mother. In my family, the person who calls out the problem is always hated more than the person who started the fire. I felt completely gaslit. Was I the crazy one? Was I cruel? I had to get out of the house, so I drove to a coffee shop. House. I was trying to work when my phone buzzed, making me jump. It was Callie. You will not believe who just called me. Aunt Linda. She was furious. I told her to get lost. For the first time in days, I smiled. I called her back. How are you holding up? She asked gently. Barely, I admitted. They are relentless, Cal. They just will not stop. Mom is guilt-tripping me. Grant is threatening me. And Paige is trying to bribe me with a bridesmaid dress. A dress I would probably have to buy myself. Callie laughed. Oh, you would definitely pay for it. And it would be hideous. Am I wrong? I asked, my voice shaking. Callie, tell me the truth. Should I help her? She is my mom. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Callie's voice was firm. Piper, listen to me. You are not wrong. You are the only sane one in this mess. But she is going to lose everything, Simone, I said. The house in Cedar Hollow, her retirement, savings, all of it. She already lost it, Callie said softly, the moment she signed those papers. Giving them money now will not save her. It will only ruin you. You would just be lighting your own money on fire. Grant is a black hole. He will take everything you have. If you jump in, he will take you too. It feels awful, I whispered. It feels awful because you are a good person, Callie said, but you do not owe them your survival. You have paid your dues. You paid with missed meals and secondhand clothes and a tough childhood. You do not owe anyone else your sacrifice, not anymore. Tears filled my eyes. Thank you, I managed. Do not thank me, she said. Just promise me one thing. Block them, she insisted, all of them. Mom, Grant, Paige, and Linda. Block them on your phone, email, and social media. Cut the cord. If you keep listening, they will wear you down. They are vampires, Piper. I can't just block my mother, I said weakly. Yes, you can, Callie said. You have to, for your own sanity. If there is a real emergency, I will call you. I will be your filter. But you need to build a wall. I looked out the coffee shop window. I saw a woman walking a dog, looking so free. I glanced at my phone. It was filled with angry calls and manipulative texts. Callie was right. They weren't my family. They were just collecting a debt I never owed. Okay, I said, I'll do it. Go be free, Piper, Callie encouraged. I hung up the phone. I immediately went to my contacts and found my mom's name. I pressed block caller. I did the same for Grant's number. Then I blocked the number Paige had used. I even blocked them on Facebook. Aunt Linda, Uncle Bob, all of them. Gone. With every single tap, a tight knot in my chest finally began to loosen. It felt like taking off a tight corset I had worn for 20 years. I was cutting off a limb to save myself. I just stared at the screen. It was over. The silence wasn't scary anymore. It was the sound of a vault door clicking shut. I was safe, and for the first time, I didn't need permission to exist. But as I packed my bag, I knew that silence could be a trick. I had blocked the noise, but I hadn't stopped their schemes. Grant was cornered and my mom was desperate. People like that don't just disappear. When you stop answering, they get creative. They get dangerous. I walked to my car and made sure to lock the doors twice. I had shut the digital door on them, but I felt a new threat was coming. The next knock wouldn't be on my phone, but on my actual front door. A letter arrived on a Tuesday, hidden between junk mail. It looked like a normal piece of mail at first glance. It was a standard business envelope with a small plastic window, but as soon as I touched it, a cold feeling washed over me. A strange chill went right down my spine. The return address was from a place called West Reek Recovery Services. I stood there at my mailbox in the freezing December air. The snow fell quietly, making the world feel muffled and still. The silence in my head was shattered. I had already blocked their numbers. I had blocked their emails and built a digital wall. But paper finds a way. It slips through the cracks. Milo trotted behind me into the house. I sat at the island and used a knife to slit the envelope open. I sliced it. I did not rip it. Precision is a habit, even when you're terrified. I unfolded the letter. It was a notice of default and intent to sue. Dear Miss Richardson, it read, this letter is a final notice. Regarding the balance on an account ending in 4492, I stopped reading right there. My heart started hammering. I did not have an account with those numbers. I knew every single one of my account numbers by heart. I tracked every penny. I had an 820 credit score. I don't do defaults. The amount was $7,842.16. The creditor was Quick Cash Advanced Solutions. I went to my office, I turned on my computer. My hands were steady, but my stomach was in knots. I logged into the Deep History Credit Database, the one with archives that go back further than standard reports. I typed in the creditor's name and cross-referenced my social security number. And there it was. But it was not a new account. That was the first shock. Grant's recent attempt was a fresh wound, a new inquiry. This was an old scar, one I had never even noticed. The account had been opened 9 years ago. I did the math. 9 years ago, I was 20 years old, a sophomore in college. I was working 2 jobs, living on protein bars and no sleep. I had never taken a loan from a place like Quick Cash. I clicked on the account details. The address on the application was not mine. It was not my college apartment. It was 402 Maple Street, Cedar Hollow, Missouri. It was my mother's house. I stared at the screen's cold light. The loan was for $5,000. For years, it had only been paid on with sporadic minimum payments, just enough to keep it out of collections. But the payments stopped 3 months ago. That was when Grant started house hunting, when the money ran out. I printed the file and dug deeper. The digital signature was just a sloppy typed name, Piper Richardson. But the IP address was not mine. It was from an internet provider in Cedar Hollow. I sat back as the awful pieces fell into place. A picture so ugly I could barely look at it. Grant did not just try to steal my identity last week. Someone had been using my name for almost a decade. But Grant was only 25 then, living in another city. I unblocked Callie's number and dialed her immediately. She answered on the first ring. "Piper, is everything okay?" I needed her to think back 9 years ago. "Callie, what was happening with Grant that summer?" She hesitated. "That's a long time ago." "Why?" I pushed. "Was he in trouble?" She said, "Grant is always in trouble." Then she remembered. "Wait, that was the summer he got arrested. He got a DUI in Kansas City after hitting a parked car. It was a mess with lawyers and thousands of dollars in fines." "How much?" Wate asked. "I do not know," Callie said. "A lot." Our Aunt Mara was hysterical, certain he would go to jail. She was running around trying to sell her jewelry. I looked at my screen. "She did not sell her jewelry," I whispered. "She took out a nasty, high-interest loan instead." "That sounds like her," Callie said. "Anything to save her golden boy." I closed my eyes, the truth hitting me. She took it out in my name. The phone line went dead silent. "What did you just say?" "I am looking at it now, a $5,000 loan opened by her. She hid it for years, making small payments, but then she gave Grant money for a house. The payments stopped. Now they are suing me." "That's evil," Callie said. "It's not just him." The truth was a physical, crushing blow. I always believed my mom was just a victim. I thought she was weak and being manipulated. But she was not. She was an accomplice. She stole my credit when I was a teenager. She knew I was selling things just to pay rent. And she used my Social Security to bail out Grant. "She chose him," Callie said. "She sacrificed you." Yes, she did. My old anger felt so small. This new pain was cold and absolute. It completely destroyed the hope that she loved me. That belief just shattered into pieces. You do not commit fraud against people you love. You do not ruin one child just to save another. "What is your plan?" she asked. "I am ending it." "Be careful, Piper," Callie warned. "They are desperate." "I am not cornering them. I am removing them." For 4 hours I worked. I did not cry. No anger. Just action. First, a police report. I reported identity theft, forgery, and fraud. I named Mara as the suspect and sent proof. Second, I filed a forgery affidavit. I sent the agency a cease and desist letter. I stated the debt was criminal and not mine. I threatened to sue if they touched my credit. Third, I put a total lock on my Social Security. Government, not just a freeze, but a complete lock. No one could open an account without a federal office visit and biometric data. Then I created the timeline on a spreadsheet. The columns told the whole story: date, event, and Grant's latest crisis. June 2014, I sold Dad's necklace, so Mom opened a $5,000 loan in my name. August 2016, I graduated with honors and Grant's business failed. Mom refinanced her house to cover his losses. When I bought my own home, Mom stopped paying. Finished paying on the secret loan. When Grant bought his big house, Mom drained her entire retirement. It was a clear map of their scheme. It showed how one child was bled dry to feed the other. I printed it all on heavy cardstock and put it in a manila envelope. The perfect date was on the calendar. December 24th, the family Christmas Eve party. It was the one night where keeping up appearances was everything, and it was at Mom's house in Cedar Hollow, the scene of the crime. Blocking them was a shield, but I needed a sword. I had to deliver these papers in person. I could not just send a server. A stranger would not be enough. They needed to see my face. They had to look me in the eyes. They had to see the consequences of their actions standing right in front of them. The daughter they used as a resource was now their reckoning. I booked a flight to Missouri for the morning of the 24th and rented a car. Callie texted me later asking if I was sure. "You can just let the lawyers handle it," she wrote. I replied, "This is not about money anymore." I packed a small overnight bag. I packed the envelope. I also packed a simple black dress, the kind you wear to a funeral. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back was not the blurry girl in the family photos. She looked sharp. She looked dangerous. A survivor. I had spent my entire life just trying to prove I was worthy. I had spent my life trying to be perfect for my mother. Now I finally understood the truth. I was never the picture. I was just the support beam holding up my brother Grant. I went to my safe and grabbed my passport and birth certificate. They were the only things she hadn't been able to touch. I packed them and then walked through my house, turning off the lights. The quiet darkness felt safe. I sat with my dog, Milo. I whispered that I had to go away for a short time, but I promised that when I came back, it would be just us. The collection letter on the counter was no longer a threat. It was the key that finally solved the entire puzzle. It explained why she was always broke and always defended Grant. It explained why she never, ever helped me. She had bet everything on Grant becoming a rich man. And to keep that bet going, she stole my future to pay for his past. She had been gambling with my life, and now her time was up. I did not sleep at all that night. I just lay there. I rehearsed what I would say. Not a speech, just the facts. I wasn't going to Cedar Hollow for an apology or for my money. That was all gone. I was going simply to get my name back. I pictured the entire trip, the rental car on familiar streets. I saw the Christmas wreath on my mom's front door. I would knock. They would open it, expecting me to be begging for help. Or maybe they thought I was bringing them a check. Instead, I was bringing the one thing they'd spent their lives avoiding. I wasn't there to win an argument. I was there to end the game. The air in my mother's living room was thick with unspoken words. The Christmas tree lights cast a fake, cheerful glow on the room, but the feeling was anything but festive. I stood near the fireplace. My black dress stood out against all the holiday decor. I left my coat on. I was not planning on staying long. Mom sat on the beige sofa clutching a tissue. She looked a decade older than she had at Thanksgiving. The stress of the past month, the constant bank calls, and the threats of foreclosure had etched deep lines into her face. Grant paced near the window, filled with a frantic, nervous energy. Paige sat beside Mom, holding her hand, perfectly playing the role of the devoted future daughter-in-law. Her performance was award-worthy. Callie stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed, watching me. She was my backup and my witness. She was the only other person who knew what was in the manila envelope I was holding. "Piper," Mom said, breaking the heavy silence. Her voice was a cracked whisper. "I'm so glad you came. I knew you would." "I am here, Mom," I said. "But you are confused about why." "We are a family," she pleaded, her eyes watery and desperate. "Families fight, but they fix things. Grant is in terrible trouble, Piper." She said the bank was threatening to foreclose on his new house. "They found out about the bridge loan," she explained. "They are calling it fraud." "It is fraud," I stated plainly. She began to sob. "They are going to take the house, and they will come after me. I will lose this place and even my pension. You are the only person who can help us. Piper, you have the resources. Please, just this one time, save our family." Grant stopped pacing. He turned to me, his expression a mix of desperation and his usual arrogance. Look, Piper, he said, I know we said some awful things, but this is serious. If you can just float us the cash for the loan, I can refinance everything. I have a deal closing in February. I will pay you back with 20% interest. 20%, I repeated slowly. That is generous, seeing as you never paid. Back the $5,000 you borrowed from me in 2014. Grant blinked, confused. I never borrowed that money. No, I agreed, you did not. Mom did. I walked over to the coffee table. I moved a small, decorative bowl of peppermints and set the envelope down. Then I carefully opened it. I did not throw the papers down. I laid them out with surgical precision. Instruments. I laid out a police report, a forgery affidavit, a timeline, and finally the original loan application from 9 years ago. What is this? Paige asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. This, I said, pointing to the old yellow document, is a $5,000 loan taken out in my name. I looked straight at Grant. The date is June 12th, 2014. Ring a bell? Grant frowned. No, why would it? That was the week you got your DUI in Kansas City, I said calmly. The week you needed $5,000 to stay out of jail. Grant's face went slack. He glanced at Mom. I continued, my voice cold. I was only 20 years old. Oh, yeah. I was working 2 jobs, living on instant noodles. I had just sold Dad's necklace to pay my rent. I did not have $5,000, but you needed it, Grant. So Mom used my social security number from her files. She took out a high-interest loan in my name and signed it digitally. The room became deathly quiet with only the fire crackling. For 9 years, Mom paid the minimums, keeping it a secret, I said. But when she used her savings for your down payment last month, she stopped paying this loan, and since it is in my name, the collectors came after me. Grant whispered, looking at our mother. Mom? He was genuinely shocked. Not because she stole from me, but because he finally saw how far she went to protect him. Mom stared at the floor, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't deny it. The proof was right on the table. You stole my identity, I told her. You committed a felony. You risked my entire future. My credit, my ability to get a job, just to protect Grant from the consequences. I had to, Mom wailed, her voice breaking. He was going to prison. He was just a boy. I couldn't let his life be ruined. So you decided to ruin my life instead? I asked quietly. You were strong, she sobbed. You were always so strong, Piper. I knew you could handle it, but Grant, he is sensitive. He needs my help. I was going to pay it back, she lied, but you did not. You always chose him. You sacrificed me for your son. That is not true, Paige said weakly, without conviction. She loves you, Paige insisted. I replied, no. Love protects. I pointed to the papers on the table. This is a police report. I announced, I filed it yesterday for fraud and identity theft. My mother gasped in shock. You called the police on me? On your own mother, she cried. I called on a thief, I replied. I have also filed a formal dispute with the credit agencies. I flagged the account as fraudulent, and I provided the proof. The proof shows I never signed. Mom's face went pale. They will come after me, she cried. The agency will sue. The police will investigate, she added. Yes, they will, I confirmed. Grant screamed, Are you insane? Jail for $5,000? I told him, it is not about money. It is about what she did. And it is about what you tried to do 2 days ago. With the mortgage application, you learned this directly from her. You both just see me as a walking bank account. We are family, Grant screamed. You do not destroy family. You destroyed it years ago, I said. I am just making it official. Mom sobbed. I cannot go to jail. I am an old woman. Please, Piper, just pay it, she begged. I will sell this house. You cannot sell it, Mom. There is no equity left in it. Grant yelled at me. This is all your fault, you know. If you had helped us, this would not be happening. I replied, no, then I would just be broke too. I stepped back, feeling so much lighter. The secret was finally out. A burden I did not know I carried was finally gone. I finally knew why I never felt loved. it was never my fault. It was the brutal cost of their favoritism. Here's what happens next. My credit is frozen. You will never use my name again. I reported the fraud, so the law will handle it. You get no money from me. Grant, you are losing the house. You will have to move out, and you will have to get a real job. Grant looked absolutely furious, but he just stood there, frozen, his safety net completely gone. And Mom, I said, you should use any money you have left to hire a lawyer. You're going to need one to explain why you forged my name. You're a monster, my mom whispered. I gave you life. And then you tried to sell it. I shot back, turning away from them. I walked over to Callie, who was crying quiet tears of anger and relief. Callie, I said softly, reaching into my purse. Here. I gave her a crisp white envelope. What is this? She asked. Open it later, I told her. It is a check for $50,000. The room went dead silent. Grant's eyes nearly popped out. What? He choked. You have $50,000 right there? Yes, I said, I do. And you're giving it to her? He screamed, pointing at Callie. I'm your brother. Callie was there for me, my voice rose. Callie was there when I was sick. Callie was there when I graduated. Callie was the only one who never asked for a single dime. She is my real family. I looked at Callie. Use it for that condo or to start your design business. It is your choice. It's a gift with no strings attached. Piper, I can't take this, Callie sobbed, holding the envelope. You can, I said. And you will because you're the only one in this room who understands what loyalty really means. I turned back to Grant and my mom. They were staring at the envelope with a look of pure greed and hatred. It made my skin crawl. You are so selfish, Grant hissed at me. You would rather give money to her than save your own mother. I stared right at him. I wanted to burn this ugly moment into my memory. I wanted to remember his face when he lost. Selfish? I said slowly. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. You truly don't know what that word means. I straightened my coat. Selfish is forcing an abandoned child to ruin her own life to cover up for the son you spoiled. It is stealing my name to save his reputation. It's thinking you are entitled to my hard work just because we are related by blood. I walked to the door. I am not selfish, Grant. I am free. When I opened it, the cold air rushed in, cleaning the room of its lies. Goodbye, I said firmly. Do not call me again. I walked out into the falling snow. I heard my mother's wail behind me, a sharp cry of regret that was 10 years too late. Grant was shouting, but the snow muffled the sound. I got into my rental car. Callie ran out, holding the envelope. Piper, she called. Are you all right? I rolled down the window, letting the cold air hit my face. I am great, Cal, I said. I really am. Thank you, she said, lifting the envelope. You changed my life, I smiled. You saved mine. Now go build something wonderful. I drove away. I never looked back at the house or the twinkling Christmas tree. That whole life felt like a movie set, and the show was finally over. I flew back to Colorado that same night. When I walked into my house, it was quiet but not empty. Milo greeted me, his tail wagging, his paws clicking on the hardwood floors that I truly owned. I sat on my couch. There was no mortgage fraud investigation hanging over my head. There was no predatory loan in my name any longer. And I did not have a mother who saw me as just a source of money. I had my doyen, my peace of mind, and the certain knowledge that I was finally, truly home. Thank you for listening to my story. I would love to hear where you are joining from. Are you listening during your commute, at the gym, or just relaxing at home like I am with Milo? Please tell me in the comments below. I love reading all your thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel, Maya Revenge Stories. Hit that like button so more people can hear these important truths. Stay strong and always remember that you never owe anyone your own peace of mind.